It's a Conspiracy is a proud member of the Alberta Podcast Network, powered by ATB. For other fun programs, check out albertapodcastnetwork.com, where you can find shows like The Read Along.
Episode 17, the Cars special. Welcome back, everyone, to It's a Conspiracy. This is the podcast where we lay out the beliefs behind selected conspiracy theories, accounts, legends, myths, and more. I'm your host, Andrew, and I do not claim to be an expert on anything we're going to discuss today, and will probably be wrong about everything as usual because I've been reevaluating how many pairs of t-shirts and sweatpants I actually need. I had a very small arsenal prior to this whole pandemic thing, and now it has become like my daily kit. So I don't know about you guys. I only had like 5 shirts and like 2 pairs of sweatpants, and now I don't remember the last time I put jeans on. So yeah.
Oh, you're crazy. Jeans every day.
I
dress up like it's important.
You know, yeah.
Sleep in jeans, man. Come on.
My kids will attest to it. I've been doing a dance that I haven't had to wear pants in weeks.
You have pants on right now?
Shorts. It's just
okay.
The whole time. I've been known to do a Zoom meeting or two without even those. So yeah.
Who cares? What's the difference, right?
I guess so. Yeah. Oh, that's very fine. If you'd like to see where we dug up whatever vroom we're going to discuss today, then please check out the resources in the episode description. Charlie gets under the hood for you on those Iron Horses episode after episode, and I cherish him for that. Lastly, we are a proud member of the Alberta Podcast Network, powered by ATB.
Yay.
Vroom.
And you can check us out online at our website, itsaconspiracypodcast.com. Our Twitter, Is It a Conspiracy? That's run by the Irish Madman. Our Facebook group, the Instagram, It's a Conspiracy Podcast. That's run by Greg. Our email and our Patreon page, patreon.com/It's a Conspiracy. Joining the online distance communication time today is Gorgeous Greg, Charming Charlie, and our 2 very special guests, Mr. Scott Bell and Dr. Hardeep Rai.
Yeah.
We're so happy to have you guys. It's awesome. I can't wait.
Today.
Thank you for having me.
It's very cool. We are all recording this from our separate bunkers, and it's strange. Scott, have you done the Zoom before?
No, actually, this is the first time for me.
Your first Zoom. Okay. Well, yeah. Everybody's first.
I'm a virgin, okay? Don't bust my balls.
Third time.
That's okay.
Yeah.
We'll do our best to stay out of each other's way while we're talking, but at the same time, we're all going to kind of interject and derail.
And talk whenever we feel like it.
Yeah.
So just chime in whenever you need to chime in. Yeah. It's nice when friends come together for journeys of love and wonder. Now, ready then, just like last episodes, we're going to switch up the format a little bit. Our 2 special guests have theories to share. Charlie's got a monster of the week, I believe.
More or less.
And I've got a quick list. And so let's just run these things through here. So I'll get Scott, do you want to tell Charlie here and let him, and Charlie, maybe just share if you're familiar with this or not. So Scott, do you want to tell Charlie what you're gonna share with us?
Yeah, I guess mostly about electric cars and sort of where that's going, and what I know from when I worked in the trade myself. That's sort of the main points I guess I'm looking at.
Well, I've heard of an electric car before, not much else, and I don't know anything about you, so this is, I'm going to say no.
Yeah, we should clarify that. Greg, I don't know if you're a car guy. I'm certainly not.
My dad was a mechanic for like 30 years, so I got the basic idea.
Boom, he's throwing it down.
There we go. And then, Hardeep, what are you gonna share with us?
Self-driving cars. Conspiracies related to artificial intelligence.
Nice.
And self-driving cars. How they affect us personally as drivers.
I can't wait. Okay, well, that is going to take us to subject number 1.
But I need a nuclear reaction to generate the 1.21 gigawatts of electricity. 1.21 gigawatts!
So I'm going to talk about self-driving cars and the AI and tech behind self-driving cars and where we are as human beings and the control the computers have over us.
Definitely.
That is intense, man. This is like some Terminator.
So we're starting it off real light.
It actually is. I got really deep into that. That's a rabbit hole you don't want to go down.
Skynet, man.
It really is. It's not even about the cars.
Yeah.
So it's really, I mean, when you delve into it, it's about our reliance on artificial intelligence and talking about the foot in the door the self-driving car being that kind of thing that everybody wants. So the conspiracy theorists are backing the idea that it's kind of the proverbial carrot being dangled in front of us to let AI in the door and take over our lives. First step being we lose our ability to be able to drive, or our current muscle memory just to be able to get around, being reliant on computers and cars. So it really delves down into the whole sentient being Skynet thing, with the conspirators being a variety of people, the usual government, or maybe the tech industry, or if you get really deep into it, it's the artificial intelligence folks mining data and using that data to further the AI community and the learning environment for those AI bots. So that's kind of, the big overview of what it is. And it's not so much about the cars, but just about the cars being the gateway to letting that tech into our lives, kind of being reliant on it. Think, what it reminded me a lot of? WALL-E. Think WALL-E, where robots just control every aspect of our life to the point that we actually are unable to do anything on our own. And when that happens, it's too late.
Isn't it crazy how like WALL-E looks like the future right now? Like it just feels like
it's strange, right? And I sat at home the other day thinking the same thing. We're kind of in a WALL-E world. We're in our own little bubbles. We're reliant on technology. We can't do anything without tech. Can you imagine being in this situation this time right now without a computer, without any sort of technology to be able to get your grocery delivered, talk to your neighbors, or any of those things? But kind of, we already are reliant on it, right?
That happened like 100 years ago.
Right. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. I think it was you and I that was saying like, thank God this didn't happen in the 90s, because like, oof, that would have been really.
Oh yeah.
Make CDs to jam out to, but like,
yeah. So the thing about it is we've already got a lot of kind of what you would call low tech AI built into a lot of cars already. So they measure AI in general in levels. We use a lot of level 2, 3 AI already. Think your Google Home or your Amazon Alexa. Think about if you've ever driven a newer car that has lane assist, where it kind of pulls you back into the lane, or if you signal it, it is able to sense a car next to you or whatever and warns you, right? Those kinds of things. Fall asleep at the wheel, it sends you a warning because it senses. So that's all kind of level 2, 3 AI, which is kind of not in the driverless car realm yet. It's more assistive technology. The best we've been able to muster is probably a level 4 car, kind of the Tesla cars that they've been testing. You've heard about the accident where the car was unable to make a decision, hit a pedestrian. You've heard a few of those now, right? And those are they're way, way far off from sentient. They are way, way far off from AI that's, autonomous by any sense of the imagination. There's still a lot of just deep learning machines that are reacting to their environment, and they're still not capable of being fully autonomous. You'll see that most of them require a driver at least there to assist if needed, right? So level 4 cars can drive themselves, can make decisions on their own. But again, it's all a lot of if-then statements and a lot of evaluating sensors and making decisions based on those. So it is autonomous, not sentient. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So,
and you're running a family auto wrecking business.
I've been part of the car industry for as long as I can remember. The family business is an auto wrecker and mechanic and body shop. So I've been wrenching for as long as I can possibly remember. I'm personally extremely excited about electric cars and autonomous vehicles and all of those things, just as excited as I get about 69 Camaros and things like that, right? So I think there's a place. I can speak to a lot of it. Electric cars are getting into a realm where I'm not much good. Well, my computer programming skills start to play into those kinds of things, right? So
in particular, the accident that happened, I know there was like a car that it made a difference between a tree and a person or something like that.
It was a Tesla car, and it made a decision that prevented the car from getting in an accident, which hit a pedestrian who happened to step out at the exact same time that it made the decision. I don't remember much about it, but it was a decision-making algorithm is what it was. And it basically made a decision and a series of events that happened just at the right time. So the thing I say to that, though, is, the number of accidents that happen in that same situation under a human system is far, far worse, right?
Yeah.
We have accidents that happen with far, far less. This isn't to minimize human life, but that decision making isn't going to be 100% foolproof, whether it's human or AI, ever. So this goal to have an autonomous vehicle that never ever crashes and never has a problem is not what those programmers are going for, and not what we as humans should be going for either, right?
Can I jump in there with the?
Yes, please stop.
Yeah, so basically that is correct about the story. It was a human being that walked out the last second at a busy intersection. So it is suspected that the algorithm did not have enough time to calculate to stop the vehicle at that point. And it was a Tesla and self-drive. That came about the same year, I think, as a very bizarre situation with a Tesla where the driver had put it on self-drive, and for whatever reason, the vehicle decided to turn right off the road at full speed on a highway and completely wiped out, destroyed itself, killed the human driver. And that's what led to an actual documentary. I think it's called like "Are Robots Out to Kill Us?" or something. It was something like that. You can Google it. Just put in the 2 Tesla accidents. It's actually an interesting, funny enough, conspiracy documentary about, what is the point of these computers in cars? Do they serve as good a function as brains, like AI, and machines that work in factories that are very stationary, but yet they do the work of factory workers to get products made very quickly? And it was suggestions that maybe the AI has already gone out of our control, meaning us as scientists and engineers, people who have actually developed these things, these machines to think for themselves. It was actually a very interesting documentary. I will have to look up the title, but yeah, it was on just a year or two ago. And it was very focused on how Tesla's AI is getting much more advanced than a lot of other companies in the world.
That's very cool. I'll see if I can track that down as well and stick it in the episode description.
Which is kind of ironic.
The notes.
Kind of ironic though, because like Elon Musk himself is like fears AI. Or AI.
Well, I mean, the interesting thing is we're not even at that. Even Stephen Hawking said something similar, and great computer scientists have said fearful things about AI, but we're nowhere near that, right? We're at the point where we're blaming the computers and the AI, and this is me speaking to it not as a car guy, but as a computer scientist, which I worked as for years. Whenever I wrote a program and it didn't do what it was supposed to, I didn't ever blame the program, right? Like I went back and looked for the bug that I put in the program or the line that I miscoded, right? And we're still kind of at that stage. These cars that are having accidents, yes, they're not doing what we want them to, but it's a lot of it is still programming, right? They're doing what they're supposed to be doing in terms of if you were to look literally at the code and what their function is, right? So there's 2 separate issues here, what we're programming and this whole pie in the sky sentient AI thing, right? And we're not even close to that sentient AI. We're still at the stages where if something's going wrong, it's because of something that we're doing or down the road, right? The steps that lead to it.
And it's true because you do realize, everybody realizes that cars made today, they already have a brain in them. And as Hardeep said, they actually do have adaptive programming. They're not as evolved as a lot of AI, but they do at least have an understanding to comprehend your driving habits, your daily routines, how you're utilizing them, when you're utilizing them. A lot of companies do, when you bring your car in for repair at a dealership, for example, I worked at Volkswagen and Audi. It was part of our job to actually upload what the car had learned since it was last in the shop. So for example, when you plug in the USB drive to see if you can read off of the scanning tool what's wrong with the car if you couldn't find it mechanically, ultimately that information is still being sucked up and sent back to the head office of that brand. So computers are already with us in cars, and I agree with Hardeep. It's not something to fear at this point, but it is interesting where it's going, especially like I said with Tesla, how advanced they're getting with it.
And personally for me, and this is related to Scott's electric car conspiracies, maybe, I don't know if he's going to bring it up or not, is not so much the sentient AI, but the amount of data that they're collecting on us in these cars that they're able to just mine, right? So the more AI that we put into these things, the more sensors, the more, that kind of stuff we put in, the more access people have to it. And I realize that there's governments putting controls on that, the type of data, but we know how that goes, right? as long as someone has access to it, there's possibility to use that for something, right? So think about it this way: how much time do you spend in your car? Not pandemic time, but before this time, and it could track where you went, when you went there, how long you stayed there. It could track patterns of how often you go and where you go, and it could do predictive things like, Andrew's gonna go to school tomorrow morning. He didn't go. Why not? Right? Yeah. Those kinds of the possibilities are endless in terms of data.
Cool. Well, I guess let's take a quick second. We're on the table here, and do you want to start us off here, Charlie? With whatever you are drinking?
What are we drinking? Well, let me tell you.
What are we drinking?
I am back on the bent stick. BS
nice.
With the spiced Belgian style wheat ale, and man, I can't get enough of it.
How did you get so much of that right before this pandemic happened? You are the luckiest.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Just
I had a ton of beer right before this whole thing broke down.
Some people filled their bunker with cans and things like that. The Scream family compound bunkers full of bent stick. So,
and Greg, what have you got there, buddy?
I'm drinking Kilkenny Irish Cream Ale.
Nice.
Ooh, fancy
today.
Scott, what have you got there?
It's just out of reach, but I have Appalore Scotch, single malt.
Ooh, that sounds very nice.
Because I like steak glass.
I've talked about this one a couple times, but it's the Five of Diamonds Pilsner from Blind Man Brewing.
Super delightful.
It's fantastic, yeah. And I wanted to throw a special shout out to these guys. They just started making hand sanitizer. And
yes.
You can get like a 4-liter flagon. That is, whatever the measurement is of 4 liters of hand sanitizer, a really cheap price. And the nice thing was they donated a ton of it to like homeless shelters in the area. And they had a thing where if you emailed them and you're like, if you need some sanitizer, get in touch and maybe we can figure something out. So
do they deliver it to you in the same delivery as the beer?
For whatever reason, they can't deliver you hand sanitizer, which is funny because like they can bring alcohol to your house, but they can't deliver. So I don't know why.
My follow-up question was going to be, do they deliver it in a growler?
I guess it's the size of it'd be a growler of hand sanitizer. No, maybe not a growler. I don't know how big a growler is, but there's a funny measurement for it. Yeah, but they're making, and the nice thing is the hand sanitizer it's not that kind of hand sanitizer that like burns the skin off your hands. It's really nice. Like my kids use it today. They're like,
like a one for you, one for me kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like beer. It's weird.
Some of these beer companies have been doing sanitizer, and they've had to put labels up that say "not for drinking."
Do not drink.
Because they're packaging them in similar labels, and
But I bought it right next to my bleach.
Right.
People drinking disinfectant, man. You're in odd times.
Terrible.
So Hardeep, what have you got there?
Well, I'm a teacher and I got to work tomorrow, so I'm a giant Yeti tumbler full of coffee.
At this time of night.
Yeah. I got a lot of work to do for tomorrow. So
that's going to take us to ad number 1.
With Pod Power, ATP is making it possible for us to amplify the voices of Albertans and Alberta podcasters. This episode, we're giving a Pod Power shout out to Book Women. Book Women is a podcast about editing, publishing, and writing Indigenous stories. Hosts Tanya Ball, Sheila LaRocque, and Kyla Larson are 3 Métis librarians representing nations from across the homeland. Now they have banded together to chat books, culture, and anything else that comes up. Book Women was recently added to Indian and Cowboys podcast incubator program for emerging voices that contribute positively to the Indigenous podcasting spaces. You can listen and find out more at bookwomenpodcast.ca.
All right, Charlie Scream has a monster of the week for us.
This week, it's a little less of a monster of the week and more of an oddity of the week. Today, we're talking about Samson the Strongman, the man who ate an entire car.
Oh, geez,
That's right. I don't know so much about cars, but I did remember listening to the ramblings of Tom Waits, who at one time said, I once knew a man who ate an entire car. And I figured, Tom used to go through papers and things and write down snippets of actual stories. So I figured I'd look into it a little bit. And sure enough, Samson the Strongman, the man who ate an entire car. I'm going to give you a little bit of a heads up. There is a little bit of an Australian accent at points in here.
My. I'm excited.
So as a young man, Leon Samson ripped 6-inch nails with his teeth. He broke boulders on his head, he rested cars on his chest, and even once tried to eat an entire car. He said his superior powers were discovered in 1954 at a Japanese girly show in Brisbane. The strip show's MC called for volunteers to bend a 1-inch steel bar in half, but Mr. Samson had other ideas. That's nothing I can do. 3 steel bars, he said. The feat did not go unnoticed. 6 weeks later, one of Australia's best wrestlers, Chief Little Wolf, encouraged him to adopt the moniker Samson the Strongman, and introduced him to renowned variety show owner Fred Duffy. By 1965, Samson the Strongman had toured Australia 9 times and had earned thousands of fans. His performances include being squashed by a 500-kilogram boulder that was sledgehammered while he lay on a bed of nails, being run over by a car, and snapping 6-inch nails in half with his teeth. Oh, I'd break 4, 5, 6 nails at once, depending on how much I wanted to show off, he said. He'd bend a steel bar with his eye as well, but that number was short-lived because black guys weren't good for show business. He's most fondly remembered for his strange appetites. I ate razor blade and people loved it. No tricks, just chewed it up and got a girl to check and it was gone. By age 32, he'd eaten over 22,000 razor blades and 630 light bulbs. Then in 1969, he bet a Darwin businessman $30,000 that he could eat a whole car. One doctor predicted he'd be dead in 9 months, but Mr. Samson managed to eat the outer body of the car in just over 2 years. I cut the steel into small pieces before I swallowed it, he said to the Newcastle Sun in 1969. When I get to the engine, I'll probably have to melt it down into pieces that look like ball bearings. Samson would eat about 1 pound to 1.5 pounds a day, live in front of people at shows.
Wow.
There's actual video footage of him chopping up tiny pieces into a bowl and then chomping it down. The stunt governed plenty of free advertising, but the now 83-year-old man comes clean when he asked if he finished the bet. I moved to America and the car stayed here, probably rusted somewhere in the bush, he said. Unfortunately, he never got to the engine, but he did get through the entire outer body, and that's nothing to sneeze at, right? The amazing Samson.
That's like a few hundred pounds of metal at the time, I would say.
You know what? And I was like, okay, this is a fun story. But then at the bottom of the story, I saw the video. It's in like an ABC News story. And sure enough, like he's talking to the reporter and he's cutting pieces off and he's starting to grind it down.
That's not right.
And wait an entire car.
I love it. This is good. This is a good one.
Well, that's going to take us to subject number 2 with Mr. Bell.
Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
Hello. Yes. So just a basic overview of electric cars, but sort of maybe what's the purpose of them more so than just environmental considerations. As Hardeep was getting into there about data collection, back in 2009, 2010, when I was apprentice with a civilian school before I joined the military for mechanics, this subject was brought up quite often, actually, by our professors in Scarborough, Ontario. And it was that the whole point wasn't just so much to take a shot at the gasoline and diesel industries and make cars that rely primarily on things like lithium and stuff. It was to keep an eye on people as they're driving around town. What are they up to? What are they doing? But sold as, if your car is stolen, then, hey, you have a chip and a computer in there that will go through satellite to your local police authority, and they will immobilize that car immediately and hopefully respond quick enough to catch the criminals who stole your car. So that was a big theory that kicked around back then when I was in college. Yeah, it's funny because I guess a few years ago, we saw OnStar come about. And OnStar was there not just to communicate on your behalf to the nearest authorities if you had gotten into a car crash and maybe unable to utilize a cell phone if you had one on you, because it's a live dispatch that OnStar is providing for you. Then it became a thing where they were suggesting that they were going to go ahead and be able to immobilize your car if you called in and realized your car was stolen. In later years, by the time I did reach the military, guys who had the OnStar and stuff like that, they said, oh yeah, it's great. You do actually get a live correspondent, but at the same time too, I can't turn off where I'm going. OnStar always knows where I am. And that's just the same as what's now in the transport truck drivers' trucks. They have a permanent GPS. They can't switch it off, which has become a bit of a sore point with some truck drivers that I used to work with who became mechanics in the military. So it used to be, right, you had all the big truck stops. The truckers could take a day or two to rest in between the big drives from one end of North America to the other. Now, their companies know when they're making a stop, and they can be bugged about, hey, you know what? We promised the customer to be there in 3 days from, say, Toronto to Edmonton or Calgary with the products that we're transporting for them. No time to stop. You're just going to have to keep going and keep the coffee in you to keep driving.
Just fill up another piss jug.
Yeah. And so when you look at it that way, and it's like, well, that same technology is in my car. I'm never truly out of the eyes of authority figures that want us to subscribe to the service that company is providing. It's kind of scary. It's like that is more scary to me than computers or cars that can think for themselves at this point in history.
How long have cars been, like, is OnStar is nothing new. Like, it's probably 15, 20 years old, maybe by
sure,
now?
right?
Yeah.
So how long have cars had computers in them?
Wasn't there Knight Rider?
It's Knight Rider, I'm assuming. Yeah.
Well, you laugh, but he's not far off. You got to think about it. So cars used to be driven by carburetors. Hardeep will gladly explain this too. But so when cars manufacturers started going over to fuel injection was glorified carburetors at first, right? So it was no longer the mechanic had to measure the air volume versus the fuel volume going into the carburetor to create the perfect mixture for combustion and, say, a gasoline engine. It then became a thing where the screws were set, so the air and fuel you didn't have to mess around with as a mechanic, and you had to worry about other components of the engine. Then in the early 1980s, because in California, they've always been leaders in terms of emission control for automobiles. And that's why, thankfully, we do have cars that burn a lot less fuel at once and therefore create less emissions at once coming out of the tailpipe. In the early 80s, it became mandatory in California that all cars must be driven by fuel injection, which is controlled by computers. So there's no dumping of fuel massively without it being measured correctly and only using what you need. And from that point, the rest of the states caught up. And in Canada, our automotive regulatory body just imitates what the states does. So Canada, we have a lot to thank to the state of California for much cleaner cars running today now than, say, 30, 40 years ago. So you've had computers on board for about 30 years, roughly. It's just not as advertised until recently because, as Hardeep said, we have so many sensors now, even in the fossil fuel driven vehicles, that obviously, right? How many times have you seen your dashboard light up because it's a check engine light or a brake light or something? You're just like, whoa, what does that mean? It says I got to take it to the dealership and they've got to look at it before my car blows up, right? Yeah. And that's only really reason why, as a population, we've really noticed that there actually is a computer on board. They have been around for a long time now.
Well, that's going to take us to ad number 2.
This episode of It's a Conspiracy is brought to you by Unit B Co-working. Unit B is a multi-company co-working space focused on helping people pursue their passions and making Edmonton its creative best. Once normal working conditions resume, you're invited to join a tight-knit group of freelancers, startups, and established organizations all dedicated to getting things done. Unit B Co-working is located in the historic McKinney building on 104th Street, close to everything downtown. For more information, visit unitb.ca.
All right, so I have some fun myths about electric cars, and I had a really hard time keeping my opinion out of this. As at the beginning, I'm like, yeah, don't don't color this with your opinion, but I couldn't help myself. So a few of these things I'm like,
There's time for that later, buddy.
that's you'll know what I mean when I read some of these, because it's just like
It's hard when you get into some of these, right? Like,
it's very hard. Yeah,
like they're so preposterous, some of them, that you're just like, oh, yeah, really?
yeah. Okay, so here's 10 myths about electric cars. Myth number 1. There's hardly any choice. So Kia, with I believe it's called the e-Niro, they've been sort of working on the long-range affordable electric car, perhaps most popularly. I'm not a car guy by any means, but Audi, Nissan, Tesla, Renault, Jaguar, Volkswagen, Hyundai, BMW, Volvo, Vauxhall, Porsche, Mercedes, they all have models available or soon to be available. So everybody's making electric cars. Like it's not limited to Kia by any stretch. Myth number 2, they're slow. So the most powerful electric car from the Tesla can accelerate from standstill to 62 miles per hour quicker than a Bugatti, I'm going to pronounce this wrong, Chiron, the hypercar. So it's faster than the hypercar.
Is it anything like hypercolor T-shirts were in the 90s?
I hope so. The faster it goes, changes color.
Changes color.
Jaguar's I-Pace is faster to 62 miles per hour than its F-Type sibling, a supercharged V6 sports car. So even Jaguar's like making these super speedy electric cars. Myth number 3, they are expensive. So yeah, there's expensive electric cars. I mean, there's expensive cars, period, but there's also affordable, regular, Eddie Lunch Pail electric cars too. You don't have to be the CEO of Disney to buy one of these things. You can be just Johnny Punch Clock and get yourself an electric car if you want to. Myth number 4, they run out of electricity too quickly. So Axle Addict, which I believe is from the UK, so I'll do my best here.
Yes.
The best quoted range for an electric car is 375 miles for a Tesla model, but even those with lower capacity batteries can manage between 100 and 200 miles, which is plenty for day-to-day driving, including most commutes. So yeah, you can go 375 miles, whatever the hell a mile is. We're in Canada, so yeah. Myth number 5, charging an electric car takes too long. The cars do have to charge. This gets faster and faster. Currently, the Kia e-Niro, if you plug it in at your house, it will take about 9 hours to charge. And this, I don't quite understand this entirely, but so our house wattage is like one thing, but you could go to like a charging station and the wattage would be much, much higher. Mm-hmm. So apparently you can take your e-Niro, for example, to a charging station and you're going to get it charged up in under 2 hours. Even if you only plugged it in for an hour, you could be back to 50% from a dead battery. Myth number 6, there aren't enough public charging stations. So there's more and more all the time. This is one of those things, as consumption goes up, so will availability. They're going to be showing up all the time. Myth number 7, the battery will need to be replaced after 5 to 10 years. This is one of those ones that like really bugs me. Every single battery in anything, including something that guzzles gas, is going to have to be replaced every couple of years. Like that's just the way that lithium ion batteries work. Myth number 8. You can't take an electric car through a car wash. So this is one of the oldest myths out there. These vehicles are as airtight and watertight as anything else in the market. You can take it to the car wash. You can drive it around in the rain. You're going to be okay. You're not all going to get electrocuted.
It's raining. Get under a bridge.
Yeah. This one here, myth number 9. They might catch fire in a crash. So they might. But I mean, the temperatures and damage required to make a battery explode or catch fire would be like that amount of damage would also make anything with a gas tank fire or explode as well. So, yeah. Myth number 10. The national grid can't cope. That sounds probably like I don't know what we call it in Canada. The grid, the energy grid. If every single person in the country tomorrow morning was like, I'm going to get a bloody electric car. We all started driving electric cars. That might crash the system, but the chances of every single driver tomorrow morning switching to an electric car, and even then it might not do it. Like I don't know.
You don't even got to go that far, Andrew. Right now, think about the energy usage on our grid. It's a pretty good test. Like with everyone at home and everyone on, like this is the ultimate test of our grid, right?
We're all at home plugged into something, right? And have you guys had your power cutting in and out?
Not yet.
Nope.
No, sir.
Yeah.
No.
So I think we'll be okay. Like, you know, and like, it's the consumer thing. Like the more and more we drive these things and use them, the somehow, no matter how much we are addicted to energy, there's always people working on capacity for new energy.
Oh, and that's why I have got like 100 hamsters on 100 hamster wheels.
There you go.
All to get those batteries charged, you know?
Yeah, and your hamster wheel is a sight to behold. I do appreciate you for that.
Marathon.
It's one of those things. It's like a computer. Like back in the day, they're like, this computer has a gigabyte of memory. You could never need more than that.
You know, one of those things at our shop, we change Prius batteries for cabbies all the time, right? I know it's not an all-electric vehicle, but the fail rate somewhere around like 500,000 kilometers is when we finally replace them. And cabbies don't work on the same timeline, right? So, but 500,000 kilometers.
That's a lot.
That's far enough.
On a battery, right? Like that's when we're replacing them. So just, you know, that's my experience with lithium-ion batteries and how much they last. And even then, it's only a couple cells that fail. The experienced electrician could replace those particular cells and get it going again. And there are people that do that, right? So
yeah, just battery recycling in general. Well, that's going to take us to opinion time. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, Charlie, what was our first theory?
Oh.
Or what was that? What was the basic thing that we presented?
Auto-driving cars that drive themselves.
Cars that drive themselves. And Greg, what was our monster of the week?
Guy that ate a car, I think his name was Larry.
Samson.
Hey, there you go.
Larry. Samson does sound a little more.
Samson the Strongman.
And Scott, what was subject number 2? I guess, no, never mind. You did this. Wait. Hold on a second here. Hardeep, what was subject number 2?
The electric car.
The electric car. Yeah, okay. And Scott,
1 through 10.
Yeah, 1 through 10. Are there myths about electric cars?
Apparently there are.
Yeah, okay, there we go.
Yeah.
You could take it to a car wash, right? I guess we'll just start with that.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So in terms of the subject of electric cars and AI, I guess, Hardeep, do you have any... or autonomous vehicles. Do you want to start off your opinions on this, and then we can just kind of jump in and see how we go?
Look, the theories kind of all revolve around AI being able to take control of our lives into this WALL-E type world where the cars become sentient and the AI becomes sentient and suddenly starts to take over the world, and that it's a big conspiracy by tech companies and the government and computer researchers and, you know, Skynet. Yeah. And honestly, like, I look around my house, there's so many better ways to get a foothold into my door than my car. You know, the $80,000 car that you want to sell me that's fully autonomous compared to the 12 Google Homes and Alexas that I have in my house that are doing the exact same thing, right? That cost me I think half of them were thrown in free with a pair of socks or something like that, right?
Google Home socks, of course.
Right? Yeah, exactly. And I'm one of those people. Like, I've automated my house to the max. Like, everything can be controlled from my house, from my phone, and I'm on board. But if you want sentient data collecting AI that can completely make me, you know, drooling at the mouth, reliant on it, the car is not the way to go. The home and the automation and the TVs and the daily entertainment, that's where I think, you know, really it would go. A lot of those theories are driven by, you know, fear of what we know. You know, the Google Homes are just add-ons to our regular living. The AI car is a complete left turn from how we do it, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
That thought of giving up control behind the wheel, for a lot of people, that's hard to imagine. Sitting there, letting go of the wheel and reading the newspaper, right? For some of us, that's like, oh my God, I drive to Calgary every single week. How much I would give just to have that experience. For others, that's a scary thing, right? I liken it to my grandfather. He's 91 now, and you cannot pry his driver's license from his hand. It's control. And that thought of giving away that control is what I think fuels a lot of this. But I think there's much better ways to go about it. And much more data that they get from my home than my car. So
I think that's it's super interesting. I was already writing a note down right before you said it, but when you started talking about WALL-E and that whole thing. I was like, that's what I had half written down, because it's not the fact of, I like the idea of the technology, and it's not even the AI that bothers me personally. It's those guys in those fat fucking chairs that don't do anything. Right. They don't have to think. They just have to press a button and keep drinking their big gulp.
Yeah.
That's the part that bothers me. When you take away one of the last things of like, I have to put thought into driving. I have to go left here and stop at this red light. When you take that away, that's when people just become useless. And just like, that's one of the last big things that people actually have to think about on a daily basis. I'm going to go do this process. Otherwise, it's all like all phones and computers and stuff. When it gets to the driving part, that's the part that bothers me, is taking that away. And then it's too much like we're just fat guys in chairs,
Well, devil's advocate on that though, like I would love for the world to be in autonomous cars, because my commute to work, I see people brushing their hair, eating their breakfast on their phone. I saw somebody eating a bowl of cereal the other day, right? Honestly, I'm not even, a bowl of cereal driving. What I wouldn't give for the world to be autonomous cars. And this is coming from a guy that has a collection of classic cars that I love to drive, and I love to race, and I love to do all those things. I welcome a world where that guy over there can't kill me.
I do like that part. I mean, like, I'm totally down with even what we have nowadays, where you can tell if something's coming up on either side of you because the light shows up, right? Like, what's coming up beside you. That part's great. I don't have a problem with any of that. It's just, and this kind of goes with the other one as well, being able to turn it off so you don't have to just have an auto drive.
Sure.
Like, I'm going over here, or I want this, I don't want to have to just plug numbers in and set it and forget it. As awesome as that sounds.
Yeah, there's that urban myth. People are like, oh, the road wasn't finished, and the map, the GPS was like, just keep going, and
I turned left and I ended up in a lake.
Yeah, they drove straight up in the lake. And it's like, you are still the one behind the wheel. And right now we're in this point where we're kind of like, we're not autonomous by any stretch, like fully autonomous, but we're on that scale. Like I get in my car and I'm like, the car's like, do you want to go to work? And I'm like, yep. And like a map shows up, and all I'm really doing is I've got my hands on the wheel and my feet are on the gas and the brake, and I'm like, oh, I'm driving the car, I'm in charge. Really, I'm not. I mean, like, I'm not. The car's like, turn left, turn right, go over here, do this, stop. There's someone beside you. We're gonna shut this thing down. Like,
that GPS problem is actually one of the final leaps that autonomous driving cars have to make, right? Like, currently they're operating on landmarks that are known to them, right? So, GPS coordinates and landmarks and things that are visible. So when you tear down a bridge, it loses that landmark, and that's when problems can occur, right? So the next gen of autonomous vehicles are trying to come up with ways to be able to navigate that aren't reliant on those things that are potentially changing all the time.
That just needs another AI to make sure that all that stuff is updated all the time, so the other AI doesn't kill everybody.
Well, ground penetrating radar is the latest one that they're trying to use, right? Because your underground infrastructure doesn't change, catastrophe or not, it doesn't change. So if you have ground penetrating radar to actually navigate by at least one of the things, then that's one of those more long-term solutions to it.
What do you think, Scott?
Well, keep in mind, in Europe, I think it's in Germany and maybe Britain, for the last year, they've been talking about making taxis completely driverless. So it might actually be coming a lot sooner than you think. Might not be for the general public consumer for their own personal vehicle, but things like taxis and buses, governments are actually considering making completely robot-driven.
Johnny Cab.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, just like in Total Recall.
Yeah,
that's exactly that's exactly what they're looking at doing. And I think it was in Germany, and maybe that's where I'm thinking was they actually did a pilot project. I don't know the results of it. I never saw a follow-up article about it, but it was reported in a lot of like Canadian papers here about what was going on over there. So I don't know if I'd step inside one myself, but maybe if it's all worked out, it could be okay. If it's maybe just city blocks, right?
As long as it was tested and it was proven, and I probably wouldn't do one for the first half a year or whatever. But that part doesn't bother me. If I was going to take a cab or an Uber somewhere or something like that, or a bus, that's great. But if I want to drive somewhere, as long as I can still flip the switch, and then it's like I can do it, then that's cool.
Well, and currently all autonomous vehicles have that switch, right?
Yeah, I was just going to say that.
But it's not something that has not been taken out yet, right?
Sure, but just in line with something like the like OnStar, jumping ahead a couple of topics, right?
Sure.
Where it's always on, whether you like it or not, kind of thing.
Sure.
I feel like that would end up being the end game, where it's like, why don't we just make it safe all the time and have nobody have to worry about driving at all, kind of thing.
Okay.
So I don't know if a lot of you guys travel a lot, but many major metropolitan places already have those autonomous vehicles in their rail systems, right? Like you've been on one, whether you liked it or not. Most of those rail systems are already automated fully from start to finish. So I don't know, it's not that big a leap, is it really? I mean, you trust your life to the AI or the AI in those metro station.
I got to ask you guys, and you're both car people, so I'm just assuming that you're also like aviation experts here. But like, if someone, chances of someone thing, right? like in an airplane, would an airplane? I mean, I know there's a pilot, but would an airplane be an example of an autonomous vehicle? Because basically, they take off by themselves, they fly by themselves, and they land by themselves, and there's someone sitting there. But I mean, they're not. Like, is that? I guess the question would be: is that something we would see sooner than a like? I get in my car and I'm like, grocery store.
Not so much there. I think where you're starting to look is the mines. Fort Mac has a bunch of trucks already that are fully autonomous, and Australia uses all of their mining trucks, or a good percentage of them that are autonomous in the sense that there isn't even a driver on board. It's just all But that's all on the rails type system. And when you take that aviation example as well, it's a on the rails system. It's a point A to point B. Someone programmed it. It does what it's told. And there's a pilot there in case something goes wrong, kind of thing. It's not going to be able to make those decisions if something goes wrong, right?
I'm positive I saw a driverless car one time, like a big truck pulling like a tank of something on Highway number 2 between Calgary and like down south towards Lethbridge. And there was like a bunch of signs that were indicating like a test project of some kind or a pilot project, and it was this weird green van. We talked about it once. It looked like the Google car. It looked
you're sure they weren't just the test project wasn't just employing ghosts?
It might have been ghosts, but whoever it was, I didn't see anyone in there. So it might have
the U of A does have a very large autonomous test vehicle program, and one of the largest in Canada. I could be wrong, but it is a very large one that is operated. There's a test section on the Anthony Henday, actually, where they do a lot of testing like that. I don't know about Highway 2, though.
Yeah. Oof. Are these weird looking, like bright colored vehicles that like they're not normal vehicles when you look at them? You're like, something's up. It's bright green.
These days, color. I have no idea.
Yeah.
I think the more scary thing than the actual autonomous vehicle or its AI would be, for example, as Hardeep said about trains. I mean, look at the LRT tracks that we were having trouble with just a few years ago because signals weren't working. It wouldn't have been the train in that case. If they were AI driven, it would have been the tracks, and that would have caused accidents or definitely fatalities with vehicles, because it's the signal system is a secondary part that must work to the queue, just like the actual computer itself aboard the vehicle. So if you apply that not just to train tracks, but to traffic lights or any other type of signal system that a vehicle needs in order to operate or stop.
With our second subject, that seems like a good time to go into this. You're like this whole idea of electric cars and like what's holding them down, what's like is the industry. A lot of people are like, well, fossil fuels are kind of trying to keep them down because that's their big cash cow. But I mean, they've got records of electric cars going back to the 1880s. Like it's just as old as anything else on the road.
Well, exactly. For example, so Dr. Porsche, who is known for his work with developing Volkswagen for the Third Reich, before he went to combustible gasoline engines, he created electric engines for vehicles. That was his big thing because electricity was his main study. He was the young guy who put electricity in his parents' house in Austria, and they were the first house in their town to have it because he was just so focused on electrical. And that was what he thought was a wave of the future. Now, come along, you have companies like Mercedes and NSU and other ones that he worked for before Hitler said, okay, I want you to create this company and you're going to make the Volkswagen and on and on. He was driven by electrical and he believed in it. A lot of other German and Austrian-based mechanics and engineers at the time also did too. It was just because it became such gasoline was just such a combustible engine, especially a 4-cylinder banger, a boxer engine was so easy to put together. Might have been constant maintenance, but it was quick to build small cars and get them out there to the public to use and for government purposes. I really believe that, there's still lobbyists that are trying to hold back the electric car, even though it's done so well now. But the truth of the matter is the oil and gas company are never going to truly be put out of work, because even though the engines might be driven by electrical components and batteries and resources like lithium, you still need oil-based products to lube the joints to make sure that it doesn't corrode. All the moving components are going to move without burning out. So there's room for both industries to exist. But I think we can move ahead with electrical. And I mean, we see it in trains now. Why can't we see it in cars more commonly?
Well, and even more than that, Scott, the process to make almost every component of that car requires petroleum products, right?
Yeah.
The panels, the seats, everything, you name it. Like, there is still a huge reliance on petroleum.
Yeah.
Whether it's an electric car or not, right?
Yeah, it's not one or the other, is it? It's ridiculous that there's this like animosity, sort of public perception wise, but it doesn't have to be one does not happen at the exclusion of the other.
Well, and I think that's the public perception. If you look at the car companies, I mean, it was Volvo who said by the end of the decade they will only have electric cars in production.
Really?
2025, I think they said they would have 50% of their models all electric, and by the end of the decade to be 100% electric. Even Chevy or GM and Ford and all these guys have huge electric car programs that they're pushing. Like, go to a dealer today, and you will see everyone has an electric car. It's public perception, and I don't think industry is quite lining up with that public perception. These guys know where their bread is buttered, and they're putting their money into the electric, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. In Germany every year, all the major manufacturers, so Mercedes, BMW, the Volkswagen umbrella, which includes Audi and Porsche, they do sit down, they share technology ideas. And that's why it came about that I think it was the actual German chancellor herself announced that by 2022 or 2023, they're going to get rid of majority fossil fuel driven vehicles out in phases. So diesel by 2022 or 23, no more diesels will be made, unless it's like, commercial purpose or military purpose.
The exemption is always commercial, right? Yeah.
Yeah. But for public use, for the passenger vehicle, there'll be no more diesels. And that's a big thing because Germany was the biggest producer of or users of people for diesel vehicles, right? TDIs and all that kind of thing. So for them to say, okay, we're going to reduce it down to gasoline and electric, but we want the electric to start taking over, that's a pretty big, significant step from a major automotive manufacturing nation.
No, my biggest question about electric cars, I don't know these kind of things. So, when you buy a phone, right, and you have that phone for a year and it's great for the first year, but after that first year, the battery gets super shitty super fast, right?
Mm-hmm. So
sort of thing. I get that that's something that's sort of built into, Big Apple or Big Google or whatever it is, right?
Right.
Those things they make it shitty, so you have to buy the next one, right? Is that something that people would have to worry about with electric cars at all? You're like, well, I've had my car for a year. Now it's going to start the battery life is going to start to deteriorate like increasingly fast.
So certainly I agree with certain brands will be probably like that just so that they buy into the concept. How do we meet customers keep coming back? Whereas I think the majority of car manufacturers, especially those that excel at making electric cars, they'll know better because it was already discussed again back in 2009, 2010 when I was in college for automotive. In our textbooks, which were being used across Canada and the States, they were talking about the future in those textbooks, and we were talking about it in the classrooms as well. So up until, say, 1963, 64, it was common that cars ran off of 6 volts to power everything in the car. Lights, the engine, the ignition, all that stuff. Then it was like, no, well, we have radios now and they're getting bigger. We have amplifiers, we have speakers. We got to go to a 12-volt system. So when I was in college, it was already being discussed in the automotive industry, the actual manufacturers that would meet with the educators who would put together these textbooks, saying, we've now gone beyond that, and especially with electric vehicles, we need to go to a 24-volt system, because we have to ensure that those batteries don't deplete, say, within 5 to 7 years like the common car battery does. We need to promise something better, because if we come out with something and then people are like, this is bullshit, these cars are supposed to be better than the gasoline ones and they're dying at the same rate,
right?
Nobody would buy them, right? So the industry is very aware of it. So a 24-volt system, and that's also, keep in mind everything else. Your iPads or whatever you're plugging in, your heaters, your bigger stereo systems,
espresso maker.
Yeah, your day running lights, espresso, all those kind of things, right? So they were already considering that for gasoline and diesel vehicles, and they're now saying, yes, definitely for electrical, we need to have bigger alternators or generators to produce enough power so when the car turns off at night, it's not just relying on you plugging in for that 32 kilowatts or whatever it is you're getting, that you only need to charge it up within a few hours type of thing. So
at the same time, our efficiency is going way up with technology too, right? Like, think your incandescent versus your LED lights.
Sure.
So as we are ramping up power requirements, we're also increasing efficiency and decreasing load. Even though we're getting more and more bigger. I mean, have you seen the Tesla screens in those cars? They're ridiculous, right? So yeah, there's that. And then when we're talking batteries, we're also comparing, like your cell phone battery versus.
Sure, and obviously it's easier to change a battery in a car than it is to change a battery in a phone, right?
It actually, it's much easier. It really is. It's almost, if you know what you're doing, it's just to pull it out, drop it in,
exactly.
Yeah. There's a lot of politics around car batteries. I know that's kind of one of the episodes that I want to get into, is that people have talked about some of the mined materials and the but batteries themselves, I mean, that is like I said earlier, that's a whole other issue. Everything runs on batteries, like whether it's an electric car or a big diesel burning truck, it's going to have a battery in it that's going to need a thing. So the battery issue often gets thrown in with this, and I'm not saying it's wrong, but it's just that it's like,
you could do a whole episode just on batteries.
Oh man, isn't it wild? Batteries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Big part of my business is recycling batteries, right?
Well, you have to come back for the battery special.
Yeah, sure.
We'll talk. Rev my pistons, wasn't that a soaring flight of tenderness right in the special places? You bet it was. We really do appreciate you stopping by for a listen, and please feel free to rate, review, subscribe, tell a friend, tell your neighbor, tell your foes, spread the good word. Thanks again to Scott and Hardeep for joining in on this. That was really awesome to have you guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
We got to do this again.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
It's always nice to get the Get Along gang together. You can check out all of our past casts and social media stuff at itsconspiracypodcast.com. And we will be back on May 7th with our Mother's Day special. Thanks for listening.
Wow.
And take care. See you later.
Thank you. See you guys.
Yeah, thanks again. Hardeep, thanks, Scott. Take care.
No problem. Thank you very much. That was fun.
See you tomorrow morning.